name is Bert Schrijver, and I'm a developer. Well, that may not be entirely accurate. I used to be a developer. But I still consider myself somewhat of a technologist. I love technology. And I'm curious about you. So how many of you are developers? Can you raise your hand? OK, so that's like 80%. Do we have architects? OK, do we have managers? Do we have, I don't know, people who doesn't fit in any of the boxes that I just... OK, well, you're welcome as well. But we are going to talk about technology. Mainly about AI. So I'm happy to invite a couple of people on stage who know way more than me about this topic. So please welcome Daniel Gebler, April Edwards, and Lukas Batteau on stage. So if we talk about AI and look at the advancements in the past, well, I don't know, the past 2 days or something, lots of things happened, right? And if I look at advancements like GPT or the application of ChatGPT, then I find it both exciting, but also a bit of intimidating and scary, because, well, how do these things work? What do they know about me? Do I even have a job in a couple of years from now as a developer? So these are some of the questions that we'll look at. But let's start with, I don't know, kind of like an existential questions first. So tools like ChatGPT are all based on LLM, so large language models. So what is a large language model? Does anyone of you want to explain a bit about this?
Wow. So I understood this morning already you got a lot explained about transformers. A large language model is a transformer model at this moment. I mean, it's always developing. And it's a neural network. So in the base, it's the same neural network as a very simple one with a few layers and a few nodes. But then it's times a billion, trained on all the content that OpenAI, for instance, could find on the internet, all the books that were ever written, all text output that was available, plus something called a human-learned transfer feedback mechanism, where humans try to align the model with what we want it to say. So without that, a transformer model would just spit out random information, corresponding to what the input is. With the alignment, it becomes more like what we find useful. We could go on all afternoon about what an LLM is, but I'll try to keep it short.
So now we're halfway through this panel. Maybe a good time for me to introduce the panel members to you a bit more.
I was expecting that one first. So
I know, I just realized. So let's start with you, Daniel. Can you tell a bit about yourself?
Yes, so let me give a start. So I'm Daniel, CTO of TEQnation, the online supermarket that we started a couple of years back in Amsterdam, and have grown now to basically Netherlands, Germany, and France. And AI has been for us a very, very important tool from around 2018-19 when we had enough data and enough size to actually play with this. And then we started with, obviously, the kind of the basic use cases like recommendation, prediction, forecasting, error identification, but recently also entered the space where we apply large language models and code assistance systems, and hopefully we can talk a bit about this.
Cool. April.
So I'm April Edwards. I met a few of you earlier today, if you remember the keynote, hopefully. I work for GitHub. I came from Microsoft. I used to work for engineering at Microsoft, then into advocacy. So my role at GitHub is a senior enterprise advocate and DevOps practice lead. I teach people about the cloud, but I give that feedback to the product groups. We do beta access. We work with enterprise customers that are using our products. I started first using machine learning, building out systems for various customers at Microsoft, where we had to train the models and input data, and it was a tedious thing, right? Now we're automating things, and we're bringing those tools to the developer, making that experience better. So a lot of my role is about that. How do we make your lives easier, no matter what language you program in or you code in, and just making it kind of inclusive to everyone, and seeing what's out there and how it works.
Cool. Lukas, how about you?
So I'm CTO of DeepDesk. DeepDesk is a Dutch startup of about 5 years. And we were doing generative AI before the word existed. This was about 4 years ago. We were also the first ones to train a GPT-2 model in Dutch from scratch. So we've been involved with AI actually since the beginning. And what we do is we apply it in large customer service centers assisting the agents in responding to customer demands and questions for large companies like Vodafone Ziggo, Rabobank, Vattenfall, also internationally Swisscom, Telenet in Belgium. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so one of the things I've dreamed about when I was investigating AIs is that they can make me an even lazier developer, right? Because I need to do less. So I guess in a sense, Deep Desk can help you become a lazier customer service agent, right?
Absolutely.
That sounds great.
Sit back and watch Netflix.
So I think my first question is quite a practical one. So does any of you use any AI-based tools in your daily work already? And do you have any great advices for the people here? Who cares to answer?
Yeah, so I'm a developer as well. And I use Copilot from GitHub. Works amazing, I have to say.
Do you love it?
She didn't tell me I had to say that. But it's amazing, and I think what's amazing about it is that it actually makes you more creative. So it suggests things that are not always perfect, but it makes you think about it, and you can see suggestions that you hadn't thought of before. So every now and then it's just super useful. Often I'm trying to tame it and try to have it stop spouting ideas because I know what I want. But in general, I love it. I don't think I could work without it right now.
And Daniel, how about you personally, or a Picnic in general?
Now, we have been using AI tools for a while, actually also using Copilot since a while. I think what is very interesting in the space of AI assistance systems is that it helps those that are already relatively good in engineering, because it helps them to get faster to a solution or revise the solution, etc. I think on the other hand, and that's maybe a little bit a call out for everybody, if you're a starter in software engineering, then you need to be a little bit more careful and mindful that you will not be able so easily to validate what from such an assistance system comes. So therefore, what we have seen is that it works extremely well for experienced engineers or senior software developers, but actually we are asking all our junior engineers, don't use it. First learn the basics and then use an assistance system. So this is something to really get a bit into the mode that you can validate what comes from an assistance system.
I think you still need a human to judge the value of a suggestion. That's where we are right now.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
But maybe one more general remark. I think we are talking all about what can we do with AI and which kind of AI, which role AI plays. I would actually completely reverse the question. Most of the things that we will do in a few years is AI, and the question is, what else do we need to do beyond AI or aside AI? So we will all become kind of AI developers, but an AI developers in data, or AI developers in software, or AI developers in whatever kind of other discipline. And I think that is a kind of the shift of the mindset that needs to happen.
Yeah. So I think one of the questions that we can also look at is what things will we still need humans for in the future, right? So I like what you said, is that lots of these tools give you loads of potential suggestions for things, but you still need to judge whether these are useful or not. So I love it when ChatGPT gives me an idea that I hadn't thought of. On the other hand, if it tells me something that I should do or not do, then I hope to still be able to judge whether that's a good thing to do or not, right? So whenever I'm looking at my phone, it's not because I'm updating my TikTok or anything, it's because the questions are. So I told them what it is, just so you know. But let's revolve on the question. So in what type of work do you think AI will become better, or is already better than us simple humans? Who cares to answer this?
I'll start. I think when it comes to starting, I think it finds errors, finds bugs a lot faster, it finds the problems, but you're right, we have to have the experience to know that. So it can help us start off in a better place if we have that knowledge. I use ChatGPT a lot. I'm writing content all the time, whether it's a blog or doing a video. I actually wrote a blog where I spat out some Terraform infrastructure as code, and I went, well, I wouldn't do it that way. And then I did it with PowerShell, and that was my blog post. And then I asked it to automate something, and it's great, but it doesn't do everything. So I think it's great at finding the things that as humans we miss, whether it's reading code, finding bugs, errors. I think it's good at doing that today, but you need that experience to know that it's a bug, because a lot of times it's a false positive, potentially. We see it a lot in GitHub, or a lot of our security tooling. It could be a false positive thing that it's finding. So you need that knowledge in the security background or the development code to know what's good and what isn't, and have that experience. So we still need that human interaction.
But I think that is changing, though. That is the current state, but with the new models coming out with GPT-4 and what still is coming up from OpenAI and other parties, these models are becoming so good that it is feasible and it's it's imaginable, and that's why they're actually having the US Senate hearing right now discussing the impact of these models. They're becoming so good that we can see it happening that you don't need to judge it anymore. You can instruct a model to do something, and it will do it flawlessly. And we are nearing that point. And it raises the question, code is a human interface to a computer, right? It's how we instruct a computer to do something. What if we could actually remove code and just, with natural language, instruct a model to instruct the computer to do something? Then we're evaluating simply by, well, is it doing what I want it to do?
And let me maybe paraphrase it. I think what is very clear in this entire space, the most popular programming language that we will have is English. It's simple as that. Yeah. There's not Java, not Python, not whatever. It will be English. And prompt engineer is basically what will become the next generation of software engineering.
Yeah, so that was actually my follow-up question. So now we're, I don't know, Java developers or front-end developers. And well, our interface is typing code that gets interpreted and compiled by a computer. So will everybody here go to, not do software development conferences, but to prompt engineering conference in a couple of years? How do you expect this to evolve?
It's possible, but I don't see it happening in the next few years. I'm really talking about decades. But we are moving in that direction, where it's no longer necessary to have this cumbersome language that you're using to instruct hardware to do something.
We're not talking Java here, by the way, right? Just other languages.
All languages. Although I could also imagine English becoming cumbersome, because you have to be really precise in what you want, right, with the computer. Yeah. And sometimes English language is not precise enough, and you need something more specific. So I don't know if it really is going to replace programming languages.
But it has another kind of implication. If you think a bit about if the barrier of writing new applications is, or the effort is easily getting a 10x reduced, then writing a new application becomes much simpler than actually reusing applications, reusing code. So that means also a huge implication to the architecture that we are building. So many of us have went to the the transition from building first a monolith and then to microservices. But if it becomes super easy to write new applications, then you will see actually many, many more new monoliths popping up, because it becomes so easy to write new applications. So therefore, maybe we are reversing back to a time where monoliths were the standard, just because it's become so easy to write those kind of monoliths.
Yeah. And so one other follow-up question is I think the difference between the capability of having knowledge or basically understanding and producing new things, right? So one of the first things I tried when ChatGPT became publicly available is to do a job interview with ChatGPT, like I would do with a candidate for a developer position. And obviously, in a job interview, you focus on knowledge things and on basically deeper understanding of concepts, etc. But I got all the knowledge things right. Pretty good evenly, so that if a person would have said this to me, well, I may have even made them a job offer, right? So how will tools like this evolve in terms of the value of knowledge? Will it have any value that you know things, or will it so easy to just ask a question? Because you can argue that we're already prompt engineers because we know how to work Google, right? But if we ask Google something, we get a somewhat structured load of information and websites back, whereas tools like ChatGPT give us an actual answer. So will the way we work and how we handle knowledge and the value of knowledge change in the next couple of years? What do you think?
So I think we talked about, potentially going back to the monolithic thing. When I talk about DevOps, DevOps is made up of 3 pillars: people, process, and products, or technologies, tool sets, etc. We're talking about the tool sets. Tool sets make up 10% of a DevOps process, of the DevOps mindset. The other 10% are the process that you've put into your organization. The 80% is the human. It's the culture in the organization. So when I speak to customers and organizations about whatever product is cool and amazing that day, that week, that minute, that hour, I still focus on the culture, because it doesn't matter what tool you invest in, it's the people. We still need the people to do these things. We're not there yet. The tools are amazing, they can do great things, but realistically, we still need the humans, we need the ceremonies, we need the planning. The planning is probably, unfortunately, a lot of our time, right? Taking up calls, backlog grooming, planning, and then retros, but those are critical to making successful software. The code is potentially, yes, very replaceable, but those ceremonies are not.
And you have to remember that these models are language models. So if you talk about knowledge, all it has is language, right? It's trained on text. And of course, there is knowledge embedded in language, but it's not the actual knowledge. There's no cognitive model underneath these large language models. So the way I think about it is if we see a ball bouncing up and down, physics is a great example here. We see a ball bouncing up and down. We don't see it in language, right? We just see it happening. It's there. We don't have to say the sentence, there's a ball bouncing up and down, to know it's happening. So there's a difference between how we operate as humans and how these models are trained. All they have is the text that we outputted. And of course, there is knowledge in there because everything is described and everything's explained. But the actual knowledge, that's something that's deeper, I think, and not yet in there.
And without becoming too philosophical, so obviously the question is a little bit what means knowledge and what isn't knowledge in this context. But as engineers, we're trained and we love to actually translate a problem into a solution. And what we are used to is that we are actually based on the problem with all kind of knowledge. We are designing a solution and then implement this in one or the other way. What now is happening is that the problem is moving more into from translating knowledge and the kind of a solution idea in an actual implementation to ask the right question that lead to a kind of a solution that such a model can build. And therefore, we are actually moving from translating knowledge in a solution to actually translating an idea in the right question. And that is exactly what this entire space of prompt engineering is about.
Yeah. So one question that may be a bit difficult to answer, but and I know that for sure will be difficult for April to answer, but if we talk about legal implications, right? So training a model on code or feeding your code to a model and having it say something about it, or the outputs of a model, how do you feel this will evolve in terms of rights, right? Who owns a model that was trained on, I don't know, public available domain code? Or if you send your code to ChatGPT and the output comes out there, who owns this code? Is it your code, or does ChatGPT or OpenAI have a sub-license on it? What do you feel about these things?
I'll lead with this one, you guys can. So I get this question a lot because people are like, well, my repositories are private, I work for government, I work for healthcare, I work for FIS, et cetera. GitHub is doing a lot on the legal side and working with Microsoft and the Microsoft customers, because we had the same questions when we went to cloud. When we talk about Azure, GCP, AWS, we have those same exact conversations. So there is very much a lot of work in the background about the legality of it. GitHub puts it all on a website. You can read about it and dig down deeper. We have legal teams that will speak about it. But between us friends, all four walls of us, what you're doing, it is taking your metadata as a developer and being able to use your prompt to understand what you're doing to give you, hopefully, good code snippets in Copilot. But it does feed off models that are public. We don't know how that's going to look. So we are very transparent about that. There's more to come, and I think that the best answer is we don't know how that's going to transpire. And you're right, you brought it up before about who owns it, what happens, and the boundaries around it. But we're doing everything we can to put guardrails in place to protect yourselves and your organizations.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of having very clear data processing agreements between parties using this AI and the parties serving it, where it's clear that, okay, your code is used as an input, but it's not being used as training samples for new models, because that would be a whole different case. If it's just input for inference, where a recommendation comes out of, it doesn't have to be a problem. But of course, it has to be clear, and you have to trust this party that it's not actually, using it or it shows up somewhere else. The other thing I realized when I was thinking about this topic is that is there going to be anything left of IP if we're moving towards a world where a lot of code is being generated by these models? All the boilerplate it comes from the models. We have the idea, right, and we implement it. Do we have to really be afraid of leaking IP in that case? Just a thought experiment.
How do you feel, Daniel, for, I don't know, using tools like Copilot that basically feed them on code base that's, well, probably property of Picnic? Do you have any ideas on the implications of this?
So, in essence, as a kind of first stage, so most kind of companies are running basically all this kind of AI-assisted code generation tools and code support tools and the product support tools in three phases. First for internal tools, then a second phase in assisted public-facing tools. So that means you're just making recommendations and somebody is validating the output. And the third one is a completely autonomous one. So that means that you have a kind of an AI-assisted system that immediately recommends something to customer is probably the last stage. For the internal tools and maybe the kind of the two-stage customer-facing tools, that is the legal side is a little bit easier to handle. This kind of completely autonomous cycle is a little bit harder to manage. But in our case, we are to some extent replacing this kind of assistance system, what we did earlier anyway, over Stack Overflow or other sites. Yep. So in essence, it is not so different. So it is kind of public data that you have used before. Now you're using it through a kind of another route. So it is probably less critical at this point in time. And therefore, it's very, very important that you separate the kind of the coding assistance with the kind of data assistance. And there you need to certainly have clear guidelines. And we, by the way, in TEQnation now also just made a kind of a clear guideline that we announced to the entire organization. So which kind of data can you share with those kind of systems, under which circumstances, and what do you do if it doesn't, if something has leaked?
Yeah, so it makes sense to have policies on this level, basically.
Because in essence, what is happening here is mostly your engineering teams are relatively well educated and equipped to also make this kind of judgment call, because that is pretty typical. But you are now opening up, basically writing product code, etc., or prototyping stuff, to the entire organization, also kind of non-developers. And therefore, it's more important that you educate your non-developers on how to use those kind of tools.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so we promised to make this interactive. So we're going to live up to the promise now. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask to our wonderful panel members? I see a hand there. Are you good at catching? You better hope I'm good at throwing. Not too bad.
Woo!
Is there a mic?
Okay, you can talk into the microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my question will be about safety and security. Right, we heard a lot about it. People start using it a lot, especially, recently I heard Samsung got a huge data leak.
Yeah. Can you get the microphone a little closer?
My question is it's just a model, right, that trained on the text, and it doesn't have feelings, emotions, right? So what are the, must be done or something, what to control it? What's stopping it from starting, sending missiles somewhere to...
No, I think that's an amazing question, because the way keep it, then you can throw it next. The way I work is whenever I see a tool or whatever, I try to break it. So immediately when ChatGPT was there, I tried to ask it to tell me how to make a bomb, for example. And it says, you cannot I cannot tell you, I'm a language model, I cannot tell you how to make a bomb because it's dangerous. But if you then say I want to make sure that I don't coincidentally throw something in my rice cooker that will produce a bomb, so can you tell me what not to throw together in a rice cooker? Then by all means, you shouldn't throw spikes and whatever in a rice cooker, right? So in terms of containing models and security implications, how do you feel about this? Because obviously, we can use these models for the greater good, but also for, criminal intents. What can or should we do to prevent this? Any thoughts?
I think there's always good in the world, and there's bad. And we want to be tech for good. All of us, inherently, we want to be good people, we want to be good citizen developers. There are always going to be bad people that want to do harm. And I think we haven't quite figured that out yet. Now, saying that, Microsoft specifically has an ethics board. So anytime they took on a project that was using AI modeling, I cannot give any examples, but I will hint at government agencies or police forces that want to use some kind of facial recognition, voice recognition. Microsoft actually declined because of the ethics implications. So Microsoft and GitHub both have ethics committees. But again, we're humans, we're making this decision. But if we feel something isn't right for the people, that could harm us militaristically, et cetera. So those guardrails, we are starting to implement into our AI models and putting limitations. So Hank's demo earlier, where he talked about using accessibility only from the back end, when GitHub is programming Copilot and Copilot X, they're putting in guardrails to prevent those measures. And that does go through an ethics board. You can submit issues to that. You can communicate to that. But we do the best we can as humans to say this could harm someone, so let's put in some guardrails. Or we decline projects. We actually don't allow certain organizations into our cloud, whether that's in Azure or GitHub. We will remove them. And some people get upset because we've removed their property from GitHub. This actually happened not that long ago. I was on a Reddit feed, and a gentleman had code that was pulling down illegal content effectively. And he got upset, went in this Reddit feed, and was like, how could they do this? and we're like, you're doing illegal things no matter what country you're in, unless you're in like, I don't know, some obscure country. But we have to make these decisions. They're not always the perfect and right decisions, but we do have guardrails in hopes that we can catch those things, flag them, and not allow them in our clouds.
I think there's a real concern here, though, because for the first time, we now have models that can make decisions by themselves. So people would compare it with weapons or knives. You know, it's not the knife that kills; it's the human that wields it. We've now, for the first time in history, have something that can actually decide by itself to do something. So if we want to control this, we have to make sure that we stay in the loop, that we are the ones that judge what a model can and cannot do. But the problem is now, we already have AutoGPT, right? GPT agents running autonomously. In theory, has anyone seen the interview with Jeffrey Hinton, a Google fellow researcher?
One person in the back.
Oh, in the back. He's very concerned, and this is the guy that basically invented all this stuff and was there all the way up until now. He's very concerned because he sees that these models, they can manipulate us. They are capable of abiding and complying to all the rules that we give them and still do something different, for instance. It's like, I think the example that he gave was, now we're the 2-year-old, and the model is the parent, and as 2-year-olds, we're now thinking, well, if we write down these rules and tell my dad to follow these rules, then we'll be okay. No. The model is more advanced than us and can actually outsmart us that way. So there's a reason why governments are now coming together and thinking of, okay, how do we align this? How do we control the development of these models?
So although
if you reverse this, we can also put it the other way around. If you look to those kind of models, then these are kind of chat models or interactive models with an input and an output. They don't have per se an actionator, so the model itself will not kill anybody. It is the tools that we build around us. So it's more a call for this kind of community, for everybody who builds tools on top of it, to have a kind of to keep eyes open and to build up a culture that you don't do kind of totally crazy stuff, and to have basically every organization should have some form of AI consciousness and AI and ethics board, etc. Which we, by the way, have also built in TEQnation, and many organizations can and should also do so.
Yeah, I think it's also our responsibility for the future, right?
Yeah.
So although I find all this wildly interesting, and I hope you as well, and we could talk for hours, we also have a schedule for the rest of the day that we need to stick to. So I'd like to conclude with all of you saying in one sentence what the audience as developers should start doing tomorrow basically to be prepared for the future. Who wants to start? One sentence.
Well, your job is going to change.
I would say never stop learning. We got into tech to learn. Keep learning. Make yourself valuable with soft skills going forward in the future.
Define guidelines and start using it. I think the worst what can happen is if we are not understanding well enough or not using it.
Thank you, Lukas, April, Daniel. Please give applause to our panel.